Hello, this is Paul with Reloading123. Thank you again for signing in to my channel. I certainly appreciate your time and comments. Thank you for the thumbs up and the positive remarks. If you enjoy yourself, please subscribe as always. This next chapter, or if you will, is going to focus on reloading rifle rounds. We are going to take what we've learned on the pistol side and apply it to the rifle side. Those concepts we're just going to kind of expand upon, and much of the same terminology, actually much of the same setup. There's going to be a few new tools that you're going to look at. We're going to take a look at the trimmer. We're going to spend a little more time with the trickler. We're going to probably do a few more tips along the way, and then we're going to do some best practices as well. I'm not going to talk about the safety. Hopefully you guys are being serious about the safety, because you need to be, you don't want to be those people that are walking around missing eyes or fingers and have a story to tell. So let's make sure that we're using our glasses, following the recipe book, and working up our load safe. So without delaying the process anymore, we're going to dive right into setting up and kind of doing some of the research behind what it's going to take to select the powder and the bullet for your potential caliber. We're going to use a 270 Winchester in this case. This is a load that I have lots of familiarity with, and a rifle that I have lots of familiarity with. And I'm going to show you a little bit about what I do to do the research. I find the research part to be extremely fun. So I kind of become a little bit of a mad scientist, and I hole myself up in a room for a couple, 3 hours, kind of comparing and contrasting all my different literature and some online information, and then just picking one powder and bullet combination and primer combination and moving forward. So let's start right there. We're going to take a look at the book, and we're going to pick out the powders. Of course, I'm going to lead you to the path of the powder that I want to use and I want to shoot, of course, because you know, deer season's only a few months away, but you're going to see how I got there, okay? You know, this is what you're looking at is me and my mad scientist research. As I shown you in a couple of videos ago, I have a considerable library of books. Not everybody does, but I just to look up a 270 load, I was really trying to find out what each of these books had to say on what powder they found best to use in the 270 and where their accuracy load was. And I'm just going to kind of walk with you. So here's the date, 316, 270 Winchester. I'm looking in general at 130 grain bullets, because every book is going to be using or referencing a different bullet, a different case, oftentimes a different primer. So these are going to be general guidelines. The Lyman 50th anniversary book basically showed H4831 as the most accurate load tested. It didn't say anything about the specific powder charge. The Sierra book, check this out. I tell you, when it comes to rifle reloading, I don't know really any book that's more thorough than the Sierra book. So if rifle reloading is your bread and butter, I would highly suggest that you get the Sierra Rifle and Handgun Reloading Data book. I'm using edition 5. I think that's the most recent edition. But it shows an accuracy load and then a hunting load. So the accuracy load, this is my scribble, is at 56.7 grains at 3,000 foot a second. The one thing I failed to put on here is this is actually the powder is Reloader22. And a hunting load of 58.2 grains. This just happens to be my hunting load. It's I've gone back and forth from 57.5 to 58. Obviously it's below the max. I still haven't decided whether I'm going to do 57 or 58 for this video, but we'll figure that out when we get there. The Sierra book has no mention. That's no mention. But on Reloader22, they talk about 54 grains to 58 grains, which kind of jives with what you saw here. The Nosler book shows the best powders that they experienced were 4350, 4831, and Reloader 19. The most accurate most accurate load tested was H4831 SC at 55 grains. They really didn't mention Reloader22, but I looked up Reloader22 and all they show the max load of 58 at 3100 feet per second at a 98% volume. So let's talk a little bit about this 98% volume. So the volume here is referring to the actual volume that the case is filled. So this Reloader22 load with the case that they used, every case is a little bit different. When they put 58 grains in it, it fills the case 98% full. Okay? And what you're going to find is that when you fill the case that full, that you get a typically greater accuracy potential with the filled case. And I'm not much of a drawer, but if I was going to draw this for you, it would be something like this. It would be, here's the neck, here's the shoulder, and here's the body, right? That almost looks like a rifle case, right? A 58% case fill would sit in the gun, and the powder would kind of sit in the gun like this, right? It would be kind of on its side, or it could be kind of on the bottom. But when that primer struck, it certainly wouldn't fill sparks would fly up here where there's nothing. Some sparks would fly into the powder. It would be an uneven burn. When you've got a case that's filled at 98%, you're basically, when this thing's on its side, there's powder essentially everywhere that there's going to be a spark, and you get a more efficient burn. So that's a highly technical way of giving you a visualization, but in essence, the greater capacity, the better, to the point where you can actually compress a load, which would actually be, let's say, 102%. So you can actually squeeze, that powder charge down a little bit. I really don't like doing that because in my experience that plays a little bit with your seating depths because the powder is kind of pushing back against your bullet. But that just gives you an idea about what that's all about. In the Berger book, it talks about they found most accuracy in H4831. This is a Hodgdon powder. H4350. That's a Hodgdon powder. And Reloader22. That's a powder by Alliance. That's the one we've been talking about. Interestingly enough, with a 130 grain bullet, they actually didn't mention anything for Reloader22 with the 130 grain bullet. They just talk about a 140 grain bullet on up. In the Lee book, this is where things get squirrely, and this is the reason why I wanted to go through this exercise. So in Lee book, which is probably the worst book that I've got, it's got an incredible amount of data, but just things like this that really seem kind of out of whack. Lee doesn't make rifles, and they don't make bullets, and they don't make ammunition, right? So this has to be some independent testing, or they must be getting it from somewhere. But they don't mention anything about a favorite round or most efficient round. All they're really saying is that Reloader22 has a range between 55.8 and 60.0 grains. Now, interesting, right? Because you start looking at some of these other Nosler, they're in the business of bullets. They're talking about 58 grains. Spear, 58 grains. Sierra, they're talking about the hunting load at 58.2 grains. You see what I'm saying? Then all of a sudden you've got this Lee book that's kind of out there with 60 grains. Who do you trust? I think I can tell you who I trust, but let's go further. All of a sudden you've got a Hornady book that shows the best accuracy with IMR 4831. Now, mind you, IMR powder is like a brand name, and H4831 is a different powder. This is made by Hodgdon. This is made by IMR. Same company owns both of those brands, but they are very much different powders. Don't make that mistake. Don't be that guy. Hornady book shows Reloader22 at 61.3 grains as max. Wow, what a difference. Yeah, 61.3 on the Hornady book, 60, but then you've got a series of reputable books here, these three, Sierra, Spear, and Nosler, that are all showing at 58. So you can imagine if this is the only book you had, you would have to be super tuned on identifying high pressure signs. And you know what? I'm not going to even go into that. What I'm going to do is I'm going to give you a reference for high pressure signs. It is by far the best reference that I've ever seen. I'm going to put it up on the screen. Hopefully this guy doesn't have a problem that I'm posting this. But you really need to be a student of high pressure signs, and this is going to be the best resource that I've ever seen. So and one of the reasons I'm singling out this powder is because I've used it. This is my hunting load. My hunting load is 58, like I said, 0.0 grains of Reloader123. And I tell you, there's times when I find that load to be pushing the envelope on pressure a little bit, and that's kind of why I keep backing off to 57.5 grains. I have good experience at 57.5, but we'll see. We'll see where I go, but I do think that I'm going to probably end up doing 57.5. I might try something in between the two and see where that takes me. But I just wanted to show you this because it is incredibly telling. So just to set up this video, I read the sections on all 7 of these books, and you get 7 essentially different answers for the same problem. Now, why is that? They're using different powder. In some cases, they're using different cases. In some cases, they're using different primers. In some cases, they're using some different test guns. In some cases, be really tuned up on this. In this Lyman example, I mean, they weren't overly helpful. If you read this blurb, there's really no information about what powder on the left-hand side, which is off the screen at the moment because I want you to look at this. The firearm used is a universal receiver. That's basically just a test barrel. The barrel length is 26 inches. I'm not sure how many of you have 26-inch 270s, but I can assure you there's probably not as many of them out there as there is 24 and 22-inch barrels. The twist rate is 1 in 10, of course, and the groove diameter is 277. So the reason why I want to bring that to your attention is because if you look at the Lyman book and then you look at the Sierra book, you're going to see that the Sierra book, and part of the reason why I really respect what these guys are doing is because oftentimes they are, and I'm trying to get this in the screen, they're using real guns, firearms, Savage Model 116. Here we go, 26-inch length, 1 in 10, a Winchester case. They have a trim. They have the primer. In the Lyman book, it doesn't say anything about what primer they used, and it doesn't say anything about what case they used. Okay, so this is the Hornady book, and they're using a Winchester Model 70, 24-inch barrel, 1 in 10 twist. Hornady or case, Winchester. See, lots of good information here too. So you can get very spun up trying to believe the information that they gave you. And of course, here's the information that I just showed you. Reloader123 all the way up to 61.3 grains. My load happens to be right in this range, 57.9 to 59. It's right in the middle, but my performance is up here. So what I did is when I worked this load up originally, I started from the bottom, worked up in these various increments, and found that 58 grains was starting to show signs, was very modest signs of pressure, and that was at the very top end of the scale, and I decided to stay there. So hopefully that helps in spelling out some of the research that you do to kind of establish your load. Where I got the 130 grain bullet information from is basically every one of these resource materials named 130 grain load as the number 1 hunting load. I'm using a Sierra, and of course I'm using the Sierra book, so obviously, and they're using the Sierra bullet makes a lot of sense. I'm using a Sierra Pro Hunter bullet, and this bullet is a great bullet for shooting deer, and I've had lots of experience with that. As you can see, that bullet has a flat base. This flat base is basically designed to, it'll give you great accuracy out to about 300 yards. It doesn't buck the wind or any kind of turbulence, as well as a tapered base bullet. But what it does do very well is it's cost effective and it kills deer. So that's why I've chosen it. I got these bullets super cheap. I think I ended up paying like 10 bucks, 100, and they were on an auction. And they look fantastic. Oftentimes with this bullet, the lead tip will deform a little bit, but it's my hunting load, and deer seem to die all the same. So anyway, that's the bullet that I'm choosing. Like I said, Sierra Pro Hunter 270 130 grain Spitzer, and that's where I got the load. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to stop right there, and then we're going to go into the next video series, which is actually the resizing the brass and taking a look at some of the brass and some of the kind of the areas of caution. So I am going to leave it at that. We're going to stop a little bit early in this video and start fresh. Thank you for joining me. This is Paul with Reloading123.